Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 10th Annual JCT Povey Lecture. The Povey Lecture was inaugurated as a public acknowledgement and tribute to Philip Povey, who served JCT for many years. The lecture has become an established feature of the construction calendar and has proved to be a fitting tribute, attracting both eminent speakers and an increasing level of attendance. I'm delighted to introduce as our speaker this evening, Paul Drechsler. Paul was appointed Chairman and Chief Executive of Wates Group in April 2006. The Wates Group is one of the UK's largest privately owned construction and development companies with an annual turnover of £1 billion and employs over 2,400 people. His chosen topic of youth, aspiration and education is one of great importance to all of us, and one on which JCT sees itself, in terms of education in respect of contract provisions at least, as very much in the lead. The timing of this lecture is very fitting, as it marks the culmination of a year of JCT events focusing on education, including a very successful education competition and the launch of JCT Discovery, a standardised education module. Following Paul's lecture, there will be an announcement from Peter Hibberd as Chairman of JCT in respect of JCT's next competition. Paul and Peter have both kindly agreed to take questions and will also be joining us for the reception afterwards. Paul Drechsler will now present his lecture, At the Crossroads, A Wasted Generation or Inspired Talent, The Power to Choose. Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Drechsler.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with such a distinguished audience, and particularly to follow a great tradition at JCT. It really is a privilege to honour Philip Povey and to give this address. Previous speakers, all in my view great characters within the UK construction and property sectors, have already covered a lot of ground. So I wonder what theme might offer invited guests a different perspective. I'd like to talk to you this evening about the subject of youth aspiration education. In fact, I see this as a natural follow-on from last year's address by Mike Putman from Skanska, who spoke about one element of sustainability, the journey to deep green. Sustainability is, of course, founded on three pillars: economic growth, wealth creation, environmental impact, and social responsibility. The latter is, in my view, about what we can do as leaders to make a positive difference to society. As James Wates and many of the construction leaders often argue, there is no better industry sector in the UK with tons of potential for economic growth and social impact. We proudly account for 7 to 8% of GDP, certainly employ over 2 million people, serve over 300,000 firms, most of these SMEs, and importantly, carry out so much of our activity in the most disadvantaged parts of society. We're uniquely placed to understand and to make a big and positive difference. So on this cold November evening, I'd like to start by talking about the summer. 2 summers, in fact, this one and last one. For those who managed to get tickets to see the Olympics or the Paralympics, this year weren't you so lucky? Even if you just watched the event on television like I and millions of others did, it was still an amazing, uplifting experience. Jessica Ennis, Mo Farah, Bradley Wiggins, Sir Chris Hoy and Ellie Simmonds, to name but a few. Gold after gold, medal after medal for Britain. The stadium's alive with cheers and applause as we saw hard work and dedication rewarded. As an Irishman who's worked in this country for many of the past 35 years, I can say it made me really proud to live in Britain. I'm actually a real fan of Katie Taylor and Jason Smith, two of the greatest Irish Olympians ever. But if we compare those images with the summer of last year, when our television screens were filled with the images of shops ablaze, screaming sirens, and youths throwing stones, as so many of our major cities erupted into riots. The court sat for extended hours. There were 3,443 crimes across London alone linked to the violence, and an estimated £200 million worth of property damage. Shocking as it is, that huge figure is made up from individual men, women, and families who saw their livelihoods go up in smoke during the course of a few nights. So 2 summers, one showing the very best that young people can achieve through hard work, commitment, and strong support. The other showing the very worst of young people who've no sense of responsibility, who feel that they have no stake in society, and who often have no concept of working hard to create something worthwhile. For me, these 2 events that hit the headlines around the world are a vivid illustration of the crossroads that we as a society are standing at. So do we see ourselves moving forward along the path in which our young people learn about achievement, positive life experiences, and the great sense of self-respect that can be theirs if they work for it, the kind of thing that we saw during the Olympics and the Paralympics? Or do we find ourselves drifting down a route which sees a large chunk of population experiencing alienation, poverty of expectation, and the kind of lawless disenchantment that we saw during the summer of 2011? Do you know, by the way, which shops came off most likely during those nights of riots and looting? One of them was Waterstones. Waterstones, the bookshop, had nothing, it seems, that of interest to these young people. The issues that these 2 entirely different events throw up are particularly important for all of us here today, because the construction industry is very much a people industry. The homes and offices that we put our names to are built by people, for people. So like the whole of society, we're standing at this crossroads, and this is what I would like to talk about this evening. Let's look at some figures. As I said, we're a people industry. We currently employ over 2 million people. Perhaps more importantly, we've got to find another 80 to 90,000 skilled workers every year just to keep pace with the next decade's demands. We need to identify them, we need to recruit them, and we need to train them. So we've certainly got the demand, but what about the supply? Given the choice, I'm sure we would all rather be looking in a pool of talent that reflects the spirit of the Olympians that we cheered this year, rather than the rioters that were so appalled by last year. But how realistic is that wish? What's the pool of talent like out there? And what makes a young person into someone who can create the homes, shops, and offices of the future on board with us, rather than destroying them like the rioters? But before I talk about the figures, I'd like to say a little bit about my own background and why I'm so passionate about education and training in the construction industry and beyond. I was born in Dublin City, Ireland. My father was a Czech refugee, and my mother, amongst other things, an avid reader of books. I was always surrounded by books, and lucky enough to have been given great encouragement to do well at school. I studied engineering at Trinity College in Dublin, and my first job was with ICI in Teesside. The company culture placed great priority and value on individual learning and development. And I worked in many countries around the world and saw some examples of extreme poverty and disadvantage in Pakistan, in India, and indeed in Brazil, where I lived with my family for 2 years. However, it was only when I moved to the Wates group in 2004 that I realized the extent of poverty and disadvantage in the UK. And let me say a little bit more about this. Wates is a 4th-generation family firm that has changed and adapted to survive over 115 years. Throughout its history, the Wates family have been concerned for those less advantaged. In the last 3 years alone, 3 of the toughest in the industry, Wates Giving, the family charity, has donated nearly £6 million to charitable causes. Against this background, it's probably no surprise that nearly 40% of our business is in affordable housing, 20% in education, and a smaller percentage in prisons. And it was in my first months in Wates, where I was doing a site visit to some tower blocks we were refurbishing in Newcastle, that I saw firsthand a level of poverty and disadvantage I'd probably passed many times, but never really noted before. And it was this experience that gave me the spark for what today is a passionate interest in exploring how business can make a greater impact on society, and most strongly via engagement in education. I was given opportunities and I took them. There were training schemes available to me and I benefited from them. People helped me up the ladder and I'm very grateful to them. But I do think now, like many leaders, I'm in a position to give something back and make a difference, and hence my involvement in business in the community and the Prince's Trust. And I'm very proud of what we've achieved with these two important organisations. I'm also very proud of the fact that when Wates entered the Sunday Times 100 Best Companies to Work For list for the first time in 2010, it received a special award for giving something back. But today, the mountain that we as a society and all of us here in the construction industry have to climb is frankly huge. And here's why. Let's look at some facts and figures. 3.9 million children, almost a third, live in poverty. I actually think this is a very, very sad figure. 1 in 5 of our young people are classified as NEET, not in employment, education, or training. And we know from research by the Prince's Trust that if this continues for more than 6 months, the possibility of them ending up in prison is 5 times more likely. And this too is a concern. Nearly 2 million children live in workless households where neither parent has a job. Many of these parents have never had a job, nor have their grandparents. What sort of aspirations are these children likely to have? 1 in 5 young people from deprived homes believe that few or none of their goals are achievable. Here's a question. How many of you read or have ever read to your children? Come on, there must have been some of you out there Harry Potter fan. Put those hands up. Of the 10% poorest families in the UK, 29% have no books in their home, and 28% of these children have never been read to by their parents. I heard a story recently of a teacher who asked children to bring books into school the next day, and one child brought in the Argos catalogue because that was the only book at home. Now, we know that although Britain is the 7th biggest economy in the world, there's real deprivation in the country. Not only that, but the whole concept of work is quite simply alien to millions of people. They've no idea what it's like to take home a wage at the end of a week, to be set a goal and to achieve it, or to get involved in a project and see it through. They've never had the satisfaction of working with colleagues to see a job well done. All these experiences are things that you and I will take for granted when we're back in the office tomorrow, mean nothing to them. 1 in 6 children will leave school without the ability to read, write, or add up properly. So how are we doing? Well, I believe that education is the key to changing things for the better. Raising aspirations and attainment is the most important long-term priority for the UK. Our industry, like so many others, has to compete internationally. So let's look at the UK's international ranking in educational performance. These are the OECD Programme for International Student Assessment scores. In literacy, since 2003, we've fallen from 7th to 25th place in the world. In our business, measurement and calculations are essential. So how is Britain doing in terms of numeracy? It's fallen from 8th to 28th place between 2003 and 2009. And when you look at the UK's needs in terms of infrastructure, in terms of energy, science is a vital, vital subject. Well, what's been happening in that area? In a short space of time, we've moved from 4th to 16th place in the world. International competitiveness is fundamental to the long-term success of the UK. You could say that this pool of talent I've talked about is stagnant rather than sparkling. Now, this obviously has a direct effect on us as a country, as an industry, and as individuals. We in the construction industry need talented, enthusiastic, skilled people, but they are in short supply. And we all need to do something about the culture of worklessness, the lack of education, and the low aspiration that is the reality for so many of our young and not so young people. Now, let me give you one more reason why I believe business needs to get involved in helping our young people to learn and develop. And it's not just to give us a warm, fuzzy feeling or to tick some corporate social responsibility box. The Occupy movement, the attacks on the banks, the criticism of Vodafone and others for not paying what is seen as their fair share of tax. There's a hostility to business at the moment that is frankly concerning and very destructive. Increasingly, numbers of people, especially young people, feel that the corporate world is against them and is something to be attacked and defeated. We need to work harder than ever to prove that you can make profits and satisfy shareholders and still help those in society who need a hand up. If anything, we need to show that when it comes to social exclusion, dangerous inequality, and lack of opportunity, that we're a vital part of the solution, not the fundamental cause of the problem. Now, if you're beginning to get a bit overcome by despair, don't be. Because here's another interesting statistic from the Prince's Trust. 78% of young people agree that having a good job is a key priority for the future. So the demand and the interest are both there, and I firmly believe that the demand from this industry and our genuine desire by so many young people have a common solution. We talk a lot about synergy in our industry, and there's a fantastic opportunity here for some truly exciting, constructive synergy. Our job in construction, as you know, is very much about identifying a problem and then finding a practical solution to it. Based not only on my own career, but also much of what I've seen happen at Wates and across the industry, I know there are simple, practical steps we can all take to help society, to help our sector, and to help businesses. Let me just tell you a bit about Kyla Fry. Kyla Fry, a single mother living in a tower block in East London, had given up any great hope of employment, came onto our Building Futures programme, learned a bit about the construction industry, became a resident liaison officer, and 3 years later was shortlisted to be Resident Liaison Officer of the Year. And this is what she had to say as a result of her experience. I meet some wonderful people. I fitted in really well. I'm able to just be myself here, although I do work really hard. Here's another example of a young person who visited Wates that I would be proud to employ. Daniel Idundan, who came to us from Pimlico Academy, and I let him tell you his story.
For me, the chance to have work experience at Wates has opened my eyes into various areas I never knew existed. During my time at Wates, I was able to gain lots of qualities, understanding and experience around a workplace. I visited several sites, inspecting the development, highlighting any near misses I'm sure you're all familiar with. I also, with another student, carried out research on current projects in the pipeline. In addition to this, I spoke to a number of people whilst also asking a lot of questions. Inspirational is a word I would use to describe all my Wates mentors.
So Daniel is a great example of how we can reach young people through an initiative called Business Class, which is the flagship education program of business in the community. I mentioned earlier that I'm chair of the Education Leadership Team Business in the Community, and Business Class is creating a sea change in the way businesses work with secondary schools. It focuses on 4 key pillars: leadership and governance, enterprise and employability, curriculum support, and wider issues. As well as Wates, there are 145 other well-known companies who've signed up to Business Class. Our numbers are growing every week, and other companies include the Prudential, Alliance and Leicester, Cadbury, BT, PwC, UBS, Jaguar Land Rover, John Lang, and many others. Through Business Class, we create a long-term strategic partnership between a business and a secondary school for 3 years or more. We identify the areas in which a business can make the greatest difference, and we help them to put it into practice. Then, based on a well-defined gap analysis process, the school determines the priorities for the partnership. For example, the Blessed Hugh Farringdon School has a partnership with the Prudential. They're running a pilot mentoring scheme for 11-year-olds. They've also trialled a budding school leadership program with staff, and they've used some of the Prudential leadership training materials in the school. And the Prudential has also supported personal financial education for Year 8 students. Business Class is now active in 220 schools. 66% of English business class schools fall within the top 33% most deprived communities. 82% of business class schools fall below the 2011 national average of 58% pupil achievement for 5A star to C grades, including English and maths. So as you can see, we're targeting this help where it's needed the most. And surely this is a win-win, a better future for our young people and a better pool of talent for the construction industry and the wider economy. But then this partnership idea goes beyond this, as these businesses and schools collaborate with others in their area to form localized clusters. These clusters allow them to pool resources and ideas and to share best practice. There are now 27 clusters involving more than 145 leading businesses, and our long-term goal is to build 500 business class partnerships by 2014, with 65% of these in the top 20% of the most deprived communities in the UK. Here's what Helen Noble, Deputy Head Teacher at Ernsford Grange School in Coventry, a member of the Coventry Business Cluster, has to say about her experience.
The main benefits of schemes like Business Class clearly help to support the school's drive to raise standards, but not just academic standards, also standards in terms of the pupils' self-esteem and self-confidence and their readiness for work. It is really, really vital that we provide students who are equipped as well as they possibly can be for the world of work, particularly in the climate of youth unemployment as it is at the moment, and help from businesses themselves so that they can guide us in what they want from a new employee.
From the point of view of businesses, the response has been equally enthusiastic. Bart Schmeink, who's MD of Merseyrail in the Liverpool Business Cluster, said Business Class had been a huge success. Our staff have loved it, and they've learned how to look at their own jobs with a different set of eyes, looking at it from the outside in. It's great to see how young people behave and interact with more flair and more self-confidence week on week. And I can say that academic research through the Cass Business School also supports these positive experiences. The robust research evidence shows the effectiveness of partnerships in improving educational attainment, employability, and school governance. So we've made a great start, and already we've seen impressive results, but there's still a huge amount of work to do and huge potential. According to recent research by KPMG, few schools have highly developed systematic partnerships with businesses. So let me ask you, have you engaged strategically with schools in your area? Have you thought about the possibilities of working with them? What about talking to your own kids' head teachers? As you can see, the demand is there, and the results of strategic long-term engagement can be very impressive. Our aim in the Business Class programme is to empower over 75,000 young people every year, raising their aspirations and the skills, and to do this by 2015. But we need the help and engagement of everybody in business. At Wates this year, our employees have donated over 500 hours to try and inspire 2,500 students collectively across 8 business class partnerships. There are so many great examples and stories about business class, I could keep you here all night. But I want to just share 3 statistics that are very encouraging. From those schools that have been involved in long-term partnerships with business the longest, they've seen a 38% improvement in academic achievement, a 40% increase in employability, and 85% of the schools surveyed said it was either very or extremely beneficial to have a business partnership and that they want to see more employer engagement. So I think this is another example of a win-win in practice. At Wates, we have a pioneering initiative to help long-term unemployed people. It's called Building Futures, and it's a 2-week qualification and credit framework, an accredited vocational program. Building Futures is aimed at long-term unemployed adults, all of whom are disadvantaged in finding work, and it provides soft skills training and practical training, as well as a valuable insight into the construction industry. Just last week, we celebrated the 599th person to go through the program. 599 people whose perspective and confidence about the world of work was changed. Our success rate in that program is over 50% in getting people into further work, education, or training. One last part of the community I want to mention is the prison population. I know for most of us, the idea of a convicted thief, complete with toolbox, in a stranger's new home would be pretty worrying. But what if that ex-offender, with his string of previous convictions, is plastering the walls or finishing off the electrics? At Wates, we've now helped over 50 ex-offenders to avoid returning to prison by assisting them with employment opportunities. Recent research by the Prison Reform Trust shows that employment reduces the risk of reoffending by between 1/3 and 1/2. So we get motivated individuals, grateful for an opportunity, society has fewer criminals, and most importantly, these people have something that they've probably never had before: hope and opportunity. There's just one more example of the enthusiasm there is amongst young people to experience working life in a successful, growing construction company. A few months ago, the Year 9 students from Pimlico Academy came on a class trip to our office at the Peak opposite Victoria Station, very near their school. My colleague, Victoria Baker, hosted the visit, and I'd like you to hear what she had to say about it.
It was a bit nerve-wracking preparing for the visit, as I was a bit worried the students would be bored or cheeky. But with the help of a few willing Wates volunteers who came by each to spend about 20-30 minutes to talk about their experiences and the projects they're working on, the time flew by and the kids were really relaxed and really engaged. And I think one of the most interesting activities for them was simply touring the office and getting a feel for how people behave in the workplace and the type of work that we do at Wates. One of the education bid teams were in the final throes of preparing for an academy bid that afternoon, for an interview that afternoon, and they took some time out to introduce themselves and to show the kids a model of the design, which was really exciting for them, and we all wished them the best of luck. I was really lucky to witness firsthand that Friday just how a few hours and a few conversations with young people could really open their eyes to the possibilities of a life beyond what they thought they could achieve. And there's one conversation in particular that struck me when we'd just finished an office tour and this kid came in and said, Miss, your offices are well nice. Do you think I could get a job here as a cleaner, miss? And I just said, well, you know, by the end of the day, we're going to be looking at all the different careers that you could do in the construction industry. I'm going to tell you more about my job and others. I said, maybe next year you might want to come back for work experience in year 10 and you might have other ideas about what you might want to do. And it was just really cool that he could perhaps aim a little bit higher than what he might have thought he could achieve when he first came in that morning.
I hear stories like that every week, and they energize me, they fire me up, they really enthuse me. I think we can do a lot better for bright, enthusiastic 15-year-olds as described there. But as well as the students, long-term unemployed ex-offenders, I'd like to talk about the positive effect that this sort of work has at Wates. Because I found talking to our employees and hearing their stories equally inspiring. The enthusiasm, the engagement amongst our staff is there, but what about the impact on the company, on the organization? What kind of return on investment do we get? Well, independent research shows that supporting employees' work on CSR activities, such as mentoring, increases their engagement. Our employee engagement scores over the past 3 to 4 years have been between 87 and 91%. At Wates, our mantra is above all, it's about people, and it shows both how and why we do business. Our learning and development strategy exemplifies this ethos and underpins our ambitious goals. Seen as business critical, we've invested about £1 million per annum each year over the past several years, despite the challenging market conditions. Our vision is to deliver creative learning and development solutions in support of the business strategy and to enable Wates people to reach their full potential, to maximise our competitive advantage. We try and encourage a culture of success through learning and to deliver business growth. We're committed to recruiting, developing, retaining the right people. Our success depends on the ability and the goodwill of our employees, and we're committed to creating a culture where people achieve all that they can do. To support this, we have a learning strategy that provides all employees with training and development through their career with Wates. And of course, we provide a wide variety of programming courses, such as thorough induction, tailored safety, health and the environment, help with gaining professional qualifications, membership of professional institutions, leadership and management development programs, and a diverse range of personal and technical development workshops. And we also, of course, understand the value and the importance of on-the-job learning and development and mentoring and coaching. And our training and development programs are an integral part of our successful Investors in People accreditation, an important external benchmark of our progress and commitment. However, the foundation for all that we do in Wates is our values, aligned with those of the Wates family and with a deep-rooted care and respect for communities and the environment. We do care well beyond the buildings. I mentioned the riots at the start of this talk, and it's worth noting, by the way, how so many communities pulled together to clear up afterwards. Young and old, every race, business owners and their customers, all working together with brooms, paint, hammers and nails to repair and rebuild. And repairing and rebuilding is what we can all do, only on a much larger scale. Of course, we have our own strategy and priorities in Wates, and we have a comprehensive plan called Reshaping Tomorrow's Communities that's focused on raising aspirations and skills of young people and creating training and employment opportunities for those who need it the most. And we could, of course, go it alone. But when your motivation is impact, then you ask, how much greater can my impact be by collaborating with others? That's why we're a member of Business in the Community. It's also why I'm really proud that Wates is one of 37 construction services companies that collaborate together on the Get Into Construction Services program of the Prince's Trust. This program focuses on young people aged 16 to 24, all too often labelled as NEETs. And I know that many of you here this evening are also actively involved with the Prince's Trust. Together, we've helped over 2,500 young people who've completed the program, and we should be very, very proud of this. The construction industry is a fabulous industry. It really matters, it really counts, and I believe it really cares. And these are tough times, especially in our industry, but even more so for the 2 million young people not in employment, education, or training. So there is a short-term issue, but more importantly in the long term, unless we engage to support head teachers and schools to transform education in the UK, we will become less competitive and the challenges will become even greater in the future. So my closing thought would be to adapt a quotation by a famous Irish American, and that is to ask not what you can do for your company, but what more your company can do for your country. Now, I hope this evening I provide you with a clear case for action and some ideas of what more you could do to achieve greater impact. You could commit to long-term partnership with a school using the business class approach. You could encourage and support your employees to volunteer as school governors, give career talks, mentor teachers or students. Or you could collaborate with others on the Prince's Trust Get into Construction Services programme. In 2006, James Wates' Povey Lecture talked about joining the dots, better collaboration across the industry to achieve a single, stronger voice. And I congratulate him on the significant progress that has been made. This evening, I've tried to follow the same philosophy around the role of business in society. Smart collaboration is the key to faster progress. Our industry is a people industry. Team working, going for gold is what we do well. Thank you very much.
The way the current economy is being bred by the government. Why haven't you approached government for them to join forces with this private enterprise to double the impact, for example's sake? So why isn't there a match for match by government? Because there ought to be, frankly.
First of all, I do appreciate that for an Irishman to keep you from a drink in itself is quite a risky thing to do. Secondly, on your question about government, I have actually spent quite a lot of time talking with government and engaging with government on this area. But what I wanted to focus on this evening is I think it is always so easy to externalize issues and look somewhere else. And I think what I've become very, very persuaded by is the enormous power and potential of those of us in business and the private sector to make a significant contribution and to make a difference. And it isn't that there isn't a leading and major role for government. I probably could have talked about that for at least as long. And I think perhaps I would just have a few thoughts on it. I think there's no question in my mind that there is a recognition that education is vitally important to the future of this nation. I think the government does understand that. I think Mr. Gove does understand that. And I believe he is totally committed to making a significant difference. Now, whether you agree with all that he is doing or not is a separate matter, but I think that commitment is there. I think my concern would be a bit that for so many years in this country, people have dabbled in education, tilting it left and tilting it right. And it's never been a fundamental look at what are the things that we need to do in the education system from preschool through to the end of school. Because the fact of the matter is, when you look at some of the statistics I shared this evening, an awful lot of the harm is done at the youngest age with children, and if they're behind by the age of 7, 8, 9 or 10, it's going to be difficult to catch up. So it's not that I don't think there's a huge role for government. I just feel that all too often it's a society that loves to complain, and I think business has a tremendous role and a great opportunity to make a big difference in this area. So I'm not absolving the government, I'm just saying I really think business can make a huge difference, and perhaps the greatest difference we can make is in raising aspirations. And I think if we can raise the aspirations of young people, which is what I see examples of each week of my life, I think if you can raise the aspiration, you've taken the vital step towards raising attainment. But I'd happily talk for a long time about the government side of this, but I guess tonight I'm putting my hand up and saying I think we can make a bigger difference. Okay,
Paul, you spoke about the schools that you're working with and the improvements they see, which I'm not surprised by, and some of those are very obvious measurements such as A grades and things. You talked about employability. How are they measuring that? What sort of skills are you talking about in particular?
So the Cass Business School is they're the people who did the research, and they concentrated this research in the northwest of England, and that report is readily available. But what they were doing in particular was looking at the success of children going into employment at the end of school. And what are the things that we're trying to do? Now, not just Wates, by the way. I did say on this program 145 other companies. But if I give you an example, a few weeks ago, we were in Pimlico Academy, which is a school we're partnered with. We did a an exercise with the children on principles of good interviewing. We helped them with CV preparation, and in the afternoon we did mock interviews. I went along myself to do some mock interviews. The children were fantastic, and I think I am absolutely, totally persuaded that so many of these young children who are in real disadvantaged parts of society, if you can generate the conversation, open up their eyes to the possibilities, you can unlock something that is powerfully there. And so I think CV preparation is a big thing. Interview preparation is a gift in a way. And if you get it, you know, we get our young people from the company in, and they all have a ball. They also did a mock interview for the children on how not to do it. And of course there was entertainment, but there was also learning.
Hello, Richard Griffin, architect. I'm very interested in what you've said. I thought that was an excellent presentation, one of the best I've heard here, I have to say. My son-in-law incidentally taught at Pimlico Academy as a numeracy coordinator. Obviously, he was dealing with people who had severe learning disabilities. He is on the Teach First programme. I just wondered if there was a link-up between industry via the teachers as well as industry via the children.
I mean, that's a fantastic, fantastic question. First of all, congratulations on getting your son into the son-in-law. Well, better still then, into the Teach First program. That is now the employer of choice of greatest demand from quality universities in the UK. So it is a program that tries to persuade students from the best universities to go into teaching for a number of years prior to progressing their career elsewhere. It's a fantastic program, and what it's doing is injecting into schools some very able, very enthusiastic, very capable young people who teach well. Many of them stay within the schools afterwards, but many go on to their sponsor companies like PwC and others. And what we're trying to do in all of this is, I talked earlier about joining the dots within our industry, but when you look at education, there's two or three things that are clear. Everybody feels an expert in education because they went to school, so everybody has an opinion on it. At the same time, there are many, many different charities focused on education, and trying to bring them together so that the power of the combination is greater than the individual effort is really important. But Teach First is an organisation that I understand well and actually collaborate with, because one of the things that they do is try and persuade chief executives to go in and give a class once a year. And I'll just tell a quick story if I'm allowed, but I went into Walworth Academy last year in Elephant and Castle. It's not the richest part of London. And I was giving a class on mathematics, into which I brought as my teaching material the Wates Group annual report, and spent time with the children talking about the annual report and numbers and how they mattered. There was about 16 of them. I think they were 15, 16 years old, and at the end of it, one of the young girls came up to me and said, "Mr. Drechsler, could I have your business card?" And, you know, I'm not used to 16-year-old girls asking my business card. It made me a bit nervous. You know, what do you do? I gave over my business card because I thought, what would it mean if I didn't? And three other students, and they were from all around the world, I mean, the most diverse class I'd ever imagined. Three other students asked my business card. By 8 o'clock that evening, I had the best work experience application letter I had ever received. And by 4 o'clock the following day, I had 4 of the best work experience application letters. So I went to one of my colleagues in the office. I said, look, we just got to make this happen. So we took these 4 children in about 3 months later during the summer for 2 weeks work experience. I'd forgotten about it completely. And I walked into her office lunchtime, and 4 young smiling faces looked up at me, and it was the warmest welcome I'd ever got in my own office. And they talked about their experience, and they said it had fundamentally transformed their thoughts about what they do with their lives and careers. And for me, that makes it all worthwhile. And I think each and every one of us, and particularly our employees, can do the same. I've no special gift other than occasionally a bit of humour, but that is what we can do with young people, and I think that's what really counts. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So thank you for your inspiring talk. But most of us here are involved one way or another in the construction industry, and your efforts, having had the success of raising the desires of our young to become employed, what should we be doing to make our own industry more acceptable as a place in which to work? And I say this because personally I failed. I had a daughter who got a first-class degree in engineering, and at the end of her university course said, "Dad, the only thing I don't want to do is engineering and get anywhere near that industry." We've had Bob the Builder, we've had every campaign going, but we still hear a plea that this industry is not attracting the calibre of people it needs to.
Well, I think it's a great question. I guess I'm not totally persuaded that we can't attract the people. Certainly in the past 4 or 5 years, the quality of young people that we've seen coming into our recruitment program, I think has been better and better each year, both in terms of cognate and non-cognate, or people who've done some construction education, people who haven't. So I think we've definitely, I don't see it quite that way. I think we have a lot of work to do, but I think we as an industry, it's so fragmented, and we tend to get more fame for what we get wrong than lasting fame for what we get right. And I'm not sure whether it's we do it to ourselves or others do it to us, but I think we've got to work hard at the pride and enthusiasm. And I think there are huge, huge reasons to be proud about what we do in this industry. And I just wonder whether we couldn't all do a better job boasting about our successes and our achievements. And we did try through Creating Britain's Future campaign around the time of the Olympics to try and sort of bring out a little bit about what Britain was about in that respect. I mean, I think it is a fabulous people industry, and it is an industry that offers, in a way, much better opportunities for many of the less advantaged people, because we can bring them in at a junior level and let them develop and grow over time. But I think, you know, it's not long ago where everyone would have said the sexiest industry in the UK is in financial services, and how many people would say that today? So we have to treasure our reputation. We have to work on building the brand, and that's something we've got to do. We've got to do collectively.
Thank you very much. Is there a last question? You want to come back, do you, Richard?
I've got another comment.
Another comment, okay.
It's about aspiration. I don't know who's read the Evening Standard. Is it working? Yes.
Yes.
The Evening Standard this evening, but there was a 35-year-old female engineer, and she was talking to schools, and she was concerned that the young people she was talking to thought that her annual salary of 60,000, because she declared this, was in fact a weekly salary, and they were comparing it with footballers. That's a huge gap in aspiration.
I'd say it's justice. Not sure we could afford those sort of salaries, but I mean, I think there's a you know, these are tough times in the industry, and indeed it's a time when we could all do a lot more by talking about the positives and the achievements, and it will be, you know, because I think we have gone through and are still going through a tough time. So it's not as though we're going to be the biggest employer within the country on a continuous basis for a while, but that doesn't mean that we don't need the best talent available, because we've got to keep delivering performance improvement, keep improving our productivity, eliminating all of our injuries, and delivering more and more value for money. And we can't deliver more and more value for money without smarter and smarter people.
Thank you very much indeed. I think, unless there is one last question, I think there is one last question. Okay, let's have that one, and then I will... do the thanks.
It seems like you maybe wanted one. I thank you very much. Really, I love the passion. Thank you. You didn't speak a lot about the teachers. You spoke about getting new teachers into schools, but of course schools have a big cohort of existing teachers. Do you sense that we should be working with them to help inspire them back into understanding the world of work? Or do you actually feel that they are quite in tune with what's needed by the youngsters in their schools? Is there more to be done there?
Look, I think that is a fantastic question. Just as in any organisation, the performance and the progress is dependent on the leader, so it is in schools. I believe a number of things. I think as a nation, we have done an awful lot to build down pride in the teaching profession. And I think it is so important we should think about how do we build it up and how do we encourage that profession. But just as in other areas, you've got to inspire great performance and you've got to manage poor performance. So I do think giving teachers greater freedom, greater accountability for delivering the performance results in their schools at a head teacher level is important. I think at the end of the day, I've seen some of the most inspiring, fantastic teachers. One of the people who works for me on the Business in the Community programme is Sir Paul Grant from Dagenham. Now, the Dagenham school he is in the middle of a war zone. But what he has achieved with that school is just incredible. And it's about his passion, his determination. I mean, he's a Liverpool supporter, but if you put that to one side, he's done some fantastic things. Or Brenda Bigland, who was a head teacher of a primary school near Slough. And you can see when you've got the leadership, you can get fantastic results. But so I do think leadership's an important part of it. Give these people empowerment, freedom, and hold them accountable for delivering their jobs. Perhaps some less interference, but more support and more encouragement. Every employee in any organisation needs to be inspired and encouraged. And I think we've probably spending too much time in this country being critical as opposed to understanding the vital importance of this resource to the nation. Because if we don't educate, we don't change those rankings, the only thing that's certain is the UK will fall further and further behind over the next 50 years. So these are arguably the most vital resource the nation has. And if we treated them as the most vital resource, what might we do differently?
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. I would just like, by way of conclusion, and to say thank you for what you have done this evening, just to point out a couple of little bits and pieces, because there were some figures you gave which related to the literacy and numeracy and science ratings, and we slipped down all of them quite significantly. The question, of course, is what is the reason and how do you address it? I don't expect you to apply your mind to that now. It would be unfair at this stage. But quite clearly, that is something which education has got to do. That is something which teachers have got to do. I have my own feeling for why this has happened in a way. And I actually think governments of the past probably did get it wrong. What they did, when I was in higher education as a teacher, they expanded higher education. And it was probably the wrong time in which to expand higher education, because what they should have done is started at the bottom and worked up, not start at the top and work down. That was my view. And I suspect what we're now seeing is that, in fact, the bottom part of the educational process being addressed rather late in the game. And I think that's rather unfortunate. But the sort of things that you are doing now quite clearly are helping to address that. We have heard, certainly in recent years, of the mismatch between employers' requirements and the educational output. Now, I think what you have been doing over the last few years, personally and with Wates, you are to be congratulated, because I think this starts to tackle that problem. It may not be the only way in which to tackle it, but it's certainly a way in which to tackle it. The clarity of your presentation was there, and thank you very much indeed for that, because what it has done, I suspect, has taken us for a while, and I hope for a little longer than a while, outside our normal comfort zone that we have, because this is an area which we don't actually get involved with as often as we should. And I think you have actually probably started to stimulate a few of our grey cells. I've only got a few left, but I'm sure others have got far more than that. And what I think they will be able to do is to start to address that very difficult question of how business should in fact start to engage with our young people. And I think you've started that process this evening. You've articulated that very well indeed, very clearly. And I think you've also given us, because right at the end of your address, you give us some very clear ways of how we could actually assist that process. And thank you indeed very much for that. I think you let the audience off a little bit tonight, because at one point you actually said, if I can just turn to the point, it was, so let me ask you, let me lay down a challenge if you like. Have you engaged strategically with schools in your area? Have you thought about the possibilities of working with them? Do you want to ask that question and get them to put their hands up? No, we won't. That would be really unfair. But that, I think, is a challenge. And I think if we're not, then perhaps we should find ways of doing so. Thank you indeed, Paul, very much indeed for coming this evening, for your address. We appreciate it, particularly JCT appreciates it, and our audience here, I'm sure, will appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.